Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Road Show with Tony Justice and friends. We're super proud to have you guys along and tuning in. Man, today I've got just a really, really close friend, more like family now than a friend, Mr. John Highley. John's life, is the definition of deep roots trucking. He spent over 30 years behind the wheel, from hauling scrap metal and an old international transfer to rolling out in a custom Kenworth W900 that'll pretty much stop you in your tracks if you've ever seen it. He's a longtime Landstar owner operator and a craftsman of one of the sharpest rigs on the road. A man who still carries his old school trucking values wherever he goes, and it's something that I really respect. You might have even seen his truck on Green Day's TikTok or even at one of the big truck shows across the country that he goes to. But John isn't just about chrome and paint. His story is about family, grit, living life out on the road with pride. So, yeah, let's welcome to the show, the Road Show, my good friend John Highley. How are you, buddy?
Hey Tony, how you doing today?
We're good, man. We're just working, doing the TJ thing and having fun, getting ready for got some work being done to the bus. So I got it up here in Morristown and got the purgatory in the shop getting drop hitch fixed on it, 2 seats installed and a gear shifter up there at my friends up there at Fitzgerald's and Crossville, Tennessee is working on that. So yeah, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on at one time. And you're out in the great state of California today, huh?
Yeah, we're hanging out at the casino out in Campo, California. We got a show playing, corporate gig down at the Gaylord Palms Resort down in San Diego. Well, Chula Vista, almost on the Mexican border. And we picked that back up on Thursday and head back to Arkansas with it.
Head back, what part of Arkansas are they going to?
Believe it or not, Lowell, Arkansas. right down by
Really?
J.B. Hunt. Yeah.
Now you think it'd be Little Rock or something, but
Now there's an AV company out there kind of stuck out in the woods.
well, let's talk a little bit about the roots of trucking, John. You go way back. We've spent a lot of nights talking on the phone, and we probably had all these conversations that we're going to cover today in the podcast. But you grew up around trucks. Thanks to your dad, even hanging around rigs before you could drive. Can you kind of paint the picture for us of what did those early days look like? For you starting out, and what captured you? What was it about trucking that grabbed you?
My dad started driving for Greyhound, in 1965, the year I was born. Being a low guy on the extra board, he didn't always have work with Greyhound, so he also hauled steel between Granite City, Illinois, and Gary, Indiana. So I remember getting picked up in an old Ford 9000, taken to kindergarten in that. So the trucks have always been a part of the picture. My best buddy growing up, his dad had an old cab over, leased steel haulers out of Tennessee way back in the day. And I remember, oh my God, as a little bitty kid, climbing all over that truck. Me and my buddy probably drove 1,000 miles without ever leaving the driveway, just playing in that truck, And whatever dad had sitting at home, I was all over it, getting greasy and dirty and getting dad yelled at by mom because I was out there playing on the trucks, getting all nasty. So it's always been there with me. And, then first time behind the wheel was I think I had just turned 15 and gone with dad on a Greyhound trip down to Memphis, and got back into St. Louis, and he threw me behind the wheel after he dropped the people off and had me drive it down to the garage. And I was hooked before that, but it just made it worse, And 1983, I got my chauffeur's license. I did that so I could start driving a wrecker. We had a guy there in town that had a wrecker company. It took me a while to get from the 1 tons up to the big trucks, but we had an account with Yellow Freight, Consolidated Freightways, ABF, and Roadway. And if those guys broke down with a 150 air mile radius of St. Louis, we'd take one of our big trucks down, pick up one of their tractors, and climb up there and have to put the air dam on it so it wouldn't blow off because we towed them from the back. And we'd take them out to wherever they were broke down at, plop out the fresh tractor for their broke down one, and take it back to St. Louis. So started out doing that.
I remember stories you telling me about that old 1971 International Transtar, hauling scrap across the Midwest. What kind of lessons did those early runs teach you about life on the road, brother?
I was very fortunate when I started doing that. My boss was notorious for buying old junk that everybody else had already worn out, and he depended on us to piece those things together and keep them going up and down the road. And I used to get kind of jealous. I'd be out there trucking and see guys with a lot of really nicer equipment and newer equipment that had air conditioning and stuff like that. And a lot of our junk, we were lucky if we had an AM radio in it, air conditioning, power steering. He never cared about that kind of stuff. But looking back on those days now, having to drive those kind of trucks and work on them and patch them and get them down the road, it made me a whole lot more successful as an owner operator because I learned that there's a lot of money to be spent in shops that doesn't need to be spent. You know, you get out there and fix that stuff yourself and keep it going down the road.
Yeah, that's detrimental too. That's you see a lot of these companies with, lease your own truck, own your own truck, do your own thing, and these guys are just getting in the trucking industry. I mean, you talking about setting people up for failure, man. They haven't learned all those ropes. Me and Charles Gracie was talking about that the other day. How many of these drivers get just set up for failure, and how important he thought it was to spend at the very least 5 years of driving for somebody else so you can learn those hard lessons so that when you do, get your own truck and things like that, you can take care of a lot of things and that'll help you save a lot of money, which could be, difference between sinking or floating, with a business, especially now with as tight as it is, fuel prices, rates are crappy, fuel's high, everything you buy, the services, everything's doubled, it seems like, or went up a lot. So, man, learning all those little things that you can do to save money is it's just as important as being able to drive the truck almost,
Well, it
these
is. You
days.
know, one of the things I've really noticed with these rates that we're seeing right now, that's not completely abnormal for us to have these dips in the rates. And normally you can work around that. But the thing that's really hurting us right now is we're still paying COVID prices for our parts and stuff out here, and that's been a hard pill to swallow because the money going out is extreme, and the money coming in it's at a low right now. As long as I've been in this industry, there's always been these times when it's down, but you always know it's going to come back up. You know, you don't know when it's going to come back up, but you know it's going to come back up. This last run we've had has been one of the longest, hardest times I've seen in my career. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. A lot of stuff that's catching public attention and the government's attention, and I'm actually feeling more hopeful right now than I've felt in a long time. I think that we're getting ready to see the change. The winds are shifting right.
Yeah, and it's, everything like this takes time, and unfortunately, something bad usually has to happen before people wake up, and just
Unfortunately,
like the deal down there in Florida, and no matter what's done about it now, it'll never bring those people back to their loved ones. But unfortunately, it takes things like that, and I think another thing that's important. I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in out here. Everybody's going. It's going to take more than one man to make a difference. Trump alone can't fix this. There's a lot of greed out there right now, and I just use me for an example, and I'm a very small business. We don't even, we might do $500,000 in a year, and that's not even net. We spend a lot of money to make that, so we keep a small percentage of that. I went back on my merchandise to my pre-COVID prices because I just didn't feel right about charging $30 for a hat, even if my cost did go up, or $30 to $35 for a T-shirt. I'm like, at some point you got to have a reality check and go, man, this isn't right. We lowered our prices back down, and we need people across the board to do that. So it's these big corporations. Instead of making 19-20 million dollar profits, why don't you settle for 17 and get our prices down? I mean, Americans are going to have to do their part to make a little sacrifice to help. One man can't do it by himself, and I wish somehow the government would call, all these companies like Walmart's and, these oil and gas companies and, everything from groceries to, like I said, Walmart's, Best Buy, Targets, just all these corporate leaders together and have that conversation with them. Like, guys, we needed you all to help too. Let's all do our part. Make a little bit of sacrifice here for 2 or 3 years, and then get back to normal and things like that. So hopefully, these corporations and businesses start doing that because it's insane. I mean, some of these parts that were, $350, $400 or $750 and $800 now for the
yeah,
same exact part.
exactly. And that's bringing up one of your sponsors, AirDog. The parts on these new trucks is just insane. Like if you had to replace all 6 injectors on one of these X15 Cummins, you're looking at $12,000. I feel so lucky. I'm at 760,000 miles on my X15, and I'm still on the original injectors on this truck, which if you follow the X15 forums, that's kind of unheard of on these engines, and I feel like that AirDog is a big contributing factor on that.
Well, anytime you're putting steady, fuel pressure consecutive, to those injectors, and you're keeping all those particles out of your fuel, and it's just getting 100% fuel, common sense just tells you that injector is going to be more efficient and it's going to last longer. I mean, that's just common sense.
There's anything you can do out here to prevent costs down the road is beneficial. I mean, anything you can do. Now I've seen a lot of guys out here over the years, they'll spend $100,000 to save $5. And I've never really understood that, to each their own. But the things that aren't huge investments, but the return on them is great. I mean, great. You take AirDog, the Easy Claw system. I have not had one cracked airline or one scuffed or chafed airline since I put that system on my truck. There's just so many things out here, just little things. And you got some great sponsors that, I've never seen you throw a product out there, whether it be Patriot Lift, Easy Claw, AirDog, everything that you promote on your, who you are, these are all things that can be very beneficial to an owner operator out here or a company. You have to try to figure out ways to save money. And sometimes spending a little bit of money saves you a whole lot down the road.
Well, you've had the conversation many times about early on when we become attractive to sponsors and our following was growing, and that following being truck drivers in the industry, about the hard lessons that me and Misty had learned about just taking any sponsorship, anybody that come along wanting to sponsor us and us promote their brand, and learn some hard lessons. And we just kind of backed up and we made a vow that, we wouldn't accept any sponsorship, no matter how much they offered us, if it wasn't coming from people who have a genuine passion for the industry, number one, and that respect and understands that it's the drivers that makes it all possible, and that give back to the industry, and that have good products. If I wouldn't use their products myself, then I can't promote them correctly because I'm not a good actor. It's got to be a good product because I'm not good at lying or acting. So we've been blessed to have those kind of sponsors, and you've got even you now are using a lot of their products and can vouch for them, which is cool.
You don't want to throw your name and your reputation on the line for just, like you said, for just money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, getting back to your story, man, in 97, you bought your own Freightliner and stepped into independence world,
Right.
What was going through your mind making that leap, from driver to owner operator? It's a little bit scary and
scared to death.
Yeah.
I knew it was where I wanted to be. Some great friends of mine, first Corky and Mouse. I met them in 1989.
You've told me some great stories about Corky and Mouse,
Yep,
but we probably can't share half of them here.
Met them in 1989. They had bought a brand new Harley, and I had just traded on one of my old ones and bought a brand new Harley. And I met them through that situation. And they had a big old 379 Peterbilt, said "Color Me Gone" across the back of the sleeper. It was dusty rose, pulled a 48-foot spread axle reefer with it. And I met them, and they were great mentors. I learned so much from them, and they never really tried to talk me into being an owner operator, but they kept kind of plugging the idea and the possibilities and everything. They knew that my dreams and aspirations were a lot bigger than being a company driver forever.
Yeah. So what was your first biggest challenges, when you first started out? What's that hardest lesson learned?
Everything. Everything.
Was there that one instance that stands out in your mind though?
I can answer that by telling you this. And it came to me years after I bought my first truck. People said, how does being an owner operator treat you? And I said, well, the thing I've learned about it is it treats me good as long as I treat it good. I said, when you get lazy, maybe things are a little tight and you put off maintenance items that should be taken care of, it comes back to bite you and bite you big. If you don't stay on top of things, it just snowballs on you. It gets ahead of you, and then you play hell trying to catch back up again. And then that's big. You got to stay up on the maintenance. You got to stay up on everything. You got to pay attention. You really have to pay. You can't just, I think in the old days, the good old days, before I started doing it even, I think all you had to do was just have a will to work. You could get out here and run the wheels off of that truck, and you couldn't help but make money. But over time, everything, all the costs have gone up. Parts you got to buy, the labor rates in the shops. And you really got to pay attention, because if you don't, next thing you know, you're in the hole. And it's a lot easier to get in the hole than it is to get out of it. Preventive
maintenance has become a lot more important than it ever has been, I think, right now, with the way things are, with the cost. It's a lot more than just changing your oil and greasing the truck. lot of things you can do, well, just like the air dog fuel system, to increase injector life and increase your, not to mention the increase in fuel mileage that you get and the performance of your motor. But there's a lot of things you can do, don't jump right into something you hear about that's supposed to be this miracle, product, but, start asking around about it. And when you see, 4 or 5 drivers using something, they're all reporting the same type of performance with the product, that it's doing good and it's saving them money. Pay attention to those kind of things, and that really adds up. If you put an air dog on and all that saves you is 0.4 miles per gallon, you add up 100,000 miles, 150,000 miles a year. That's a pretty good chunk of money.
Oh, it is. Before the air dog, I was around 5'4" to 5'6", and I got to laugh about that. People ask me all the time. They look at my truck and they're like, "What kind of fuel economy you get out of it?" And I'm like, "What kind of fuel economy you think I get out of it?" I'm 346 wheelbase. I got 9 feet between the back of the sleeper and the front of the trailer. Fuel economy is not really a big player in my game. I know it should be, but sometimes you just got to give a little bit up to get to make yourself happy, But once I put the air dog up there, I went up in the 5.9 to 6 mile to the gallon range. And if I'm out here on the West Coast and I'm running 55 miles an hour, 55 to 60 all day out in California, running the top to the bottom, I've seen this thing get up over 7 miles to the gallon. That's now I don't think any of us have time to drive all the way across the country at 55 miles an hour. You got to make that sacrifice. But yeah, the air dog, it made a huge, huge difference in my truck. Tell you a little story. It's kind of funny here. A couple months ago, I actually had a pump fail. The pump itself went out. And Jay was just immediately got one overnighted out to me, took care of it. And it's just my luck. If anything's going to break, it's going to be with me, But I never realized how much I appreciated that air dog. It went out on me in Sayre, Oklahoma. I got it. I think I either made it to California or Las Vegas, where he had the new one sent out to me. Man, I'll tell you what, riding across without that thing, oh my goodness, the difference was amazing. We bypassed, we ran through it instead of the lift pump working, but not having it on here after running it for so many months. Well, God, what's it been on there, Tony? 2 years, I think, because we did it at your second Large Cars and Guitars, and not having it, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to get this thing fixed and get back to running the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, but the point being, is it's not that we're trying to turn this into PX for air dog, but it's just how important the little things, doing the right little things can make a huge, huge, huge difference in your cost, save on breakdowns, and you break down on the side of the road and get towed. You're looking at $5-6 grand, just for the towing bill, and you hadn't put your truck in the shop yet. So anything you can do to prevent those kind of things, if you're looking at getting in truck, and learn as much as you can. Don't be in a hurry to dive in there right off the bat. Be patient, work you for at least 4 or 5 years and learn those hard lessons, and it's going to pay off when you do buy your own truck. Listen, we're going to take a short break for our sponsors. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Leave a comment, man. We love hearing from you guys. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, hit that subscribe button and share this with your friends. We love talking trucking and old school days and old school ways and having a good time. But we're going to take a break for our sponsors, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Appreciate you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Road Show with Tony Justice and friends. Having a blast hanging out with my good buddy, John Highley. Been driving for over 30 years. John, how long have you had the truck that you're driving now, the W9?
We started building this one in August of 2017. I started out by going to ARI up in Shipshewan, Indiana. We spec'd out the sleeper, then went over to Palmer Kenworth there in Fort Wayne. ARI sends a build sheet over for the sleeper, so that way the dealer can send the build sheet to the factory with where all the holes need to be drilled, where the fuel tanks need to be placed, according to what the sleeper is going to need on the frame.
One of the things that's pretty popular about your truck is you went with the Apache paint scheme that's inspired by the TV show Moving On, just different colors. You was just telling me a story about that. Somebody at a truck stop had come up to you and
yeah, I had a younger driver come up and he was looking the truck over and everything, and he asked me, he said, man, he goes, I've never seen that paint scheme before. He said, is that something new Kenworth came out with? And I said, no, I said, actually, this dates back to like the late 60s, early 70s. I said, in fact, when I went and ordered the truck, I said, we had to dig all the way back to the back of the book of paint schemes to find this one. he kind of talked for a couple of seconds and he goes, well, he goes, I guess you're just old school, aren't you? And I go, no, I'm not old school. I said, I'm old. I just never kept up. I said, I never stayed up with the way things changed. I said, I got stuck in the way I started. That's the way I've always done it. And that's the way I'll always stay.
But yeah, I mean, old habits, and the way we are is hard to break, even though things change around us. And there's been a lot of change in the trucking industry over the years. From golly, hours of service to ELDs to carb out in California, which you was telling me. Of course, these shows are recorded, so they're predated a little bit. But you was telling me today that they're looking at dropping some of that regulation out there. So that. But what kind of difference would that make on the industry if they do that?
Well, so CARB started a deal here, what was it, last year, where, on top of everything else that we've done to be compliant with this state, I mean, honestly, that's the reason I bought another truck, was because I had taken California off the table. I got caught running illegal out here with a non-emission truck, and I went 2 years without running in California, and it cost me a lot of money because of, being in the entertainment industry. So much of our stuff is based out of the LA area. So I went out and I thought, I'm gonna do this one more time, build one more truck. And so went out and spent a lot of money to get a California compliant truck. And now they started another deal. They want you to pay a $30 registration every year, which I get it. $30 is nothing, but then you're supposed to get your truck smog checked by somebody in California. And that can happen 1, 2, 3, whatever. It's so unclear on what they want. But now the EPA has come out and said that it's unconstitutional for California to require an out-of-state truck to be smog tested, to be required to do this. So I don't know what's going to happen. There's so much going on in the industry right now. There's like I said, the winds of change are starting to blow a little bit harder. There's a lot of things that are just right around the corner. I'm really anxious to see, because we're in a bad place right now. Capacity has just got us so messed up. They preached this driver shortage for years. There's never been a driver shortage. There's been a driver retention problem, and now instead of having 10 loads for every truck out here, you got 10 trucks for every load. And what that does is that drives the rates down. It changes capacity, and we're going to have to get that fixed. We have to get this capacity problem taken care of. Guys are going broke out here. Guys are getting hungry. And like I said, these winds of change are starting to shift a little bit. I'm more hopeful now than I've been in probably the last 4.5 years that maybe things are starting to turn around a little bit, or at least getting ready to.
Yeah, it's been a long stretch of bad regulation, over-regulation in this industry. And, like you said, maybe hopefully the tides are turning and people are starting to open their eyes up. We can only hope and pray, right?
Well, I know that we've got the public looking at the industry more right now than they have in a long time. We kind of become part of the background until something happens to get us in the media. And we've been so far in the background for so long now that we've suffered the consequences. But now people are starting to pay attention right now. So we'll see what happens. I'm fingers crossed and praying vigilantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about that big Harley Davidson you got that follows you around everywhere you go, that you got strapped on the catwalk with that W900. Man, that thing draws a lot of questions and conversation. Man, it's a cool old Harley. What year is that again? I can't remember.
That one is a 90. I've got another 90 Harley, an old soft tail that's all chopped out and everything, and I carried that one with me on my other truck. And talking about my friends Corky and Mouse earlier, when Corky passed away, I got this bike. Mouse wanted it to stay in the family, so I got this bike and I put it back here. Well, Corky wasn't able to ride the last few years, so it sat in the shed, and the mice got into the wiring. I brought it out here with me, and every time I rode it broke down on me. I found more and more problems with it. So it's actually not being ridden right now. I'm going to take it home, put it in my garage, and I'll strip it all the way down to the frame and do a ground up rebuild on it. And I'll bring one of my other ones out. But I almost don't want to take it off the truck, because it's kind of like having a part of Corky out here with me,
Yeah, your way, I'm sure your way of keeping a long time friend's memory with you and keeping a piece of him after on the road. He from all the stories you told me, he's a lot like us and was genuinely passionate about the industry and loved what he did to the day that he died. So that's a nice tribute having that thing on there, and people go, Well, how in the world do you get it off to ride it? Well, most people don't know that you can drop your trailer and back your truck up alongside the back of it, of the trailer, line it up with your catwalk, and then you actually have a drop gate on your truck.
Yeah, I've got a lift gate on the trailer.
Lift
Yeah.
gate on the
Yep.
truck, and you can like get it even with your catwalk, pull the motorcycle on it, and then let it down to the ground and go tootle around, right?
Yeah. And fortunately, with the Patriot lift system on there, makes it really easy to drop the trailer. I don't even have to crank it up and down. Just go back there and hit a lever, and landing gear comes down.
Just push the button and stand there instead of straining, busting knuckles or straining your back or handle flying loose and knocking you out. We've all been there, you know. I think every truck out there that's been doing this more than 2 years has had some sort of a landing gear crank injury.
Yeah.
So, most of them minor, but some of them major. Some people's, had some pretty major back injuries and stuff. So anyway, but yeah,
I just saw one yesterday where a guy was doing a drop and hook, and whoever dropped the trailer had left the handle up on it. And when he dropped the trailer, the handle wedged up between the cross members, and he had blood all over his arm and everything before he popped that thing out of there.
yeah, you gotta love when you get to those trucks where somebody before you drop the trailer in a manner to where no other truck in the world go back under it, and it'd be loaded or not. They're hard to reel up. I guess it's nice when you come up. If you was to come up on a situation like that, you can just hit the little button, get the height you want, and then back under it. Or if you're like me, but I don't know how many times I'm terrible at this. I'll back under one and misjudge it, and it just be a little too high, and that kingpin goes over your fifth wheel.
Yep.
And then your fifth wheel flops back up, and you can't pull out. You can't go back. You gotta go back there and crank your guts out on that trailer because we did a lot of drop a hook where I was in a lot of the years I trucked. So I've wrestled and fought them damn landing gears more than I care to even talk about. But so when did you get into you've had some pretty cool gigs, man. A lot of times I've been on the phone, you'll be pulling for Green Day or heading out to Red Rock for some big concerts, pulling some group, and you've done the rock and roll freight for many, many years. How did you get into that line, specialized freight?
Well, when I first came to Landstar, that was 23 years ago. I had a mentor over here by the name of John Trapp, passed away now, but great guy. And he told me, he said, if you want to be successful, he said, number one, diversity. He said, take yourself out of the general freight market. He said, store up on equipment, blankets, bars, straps, all kinds of logistical equipment. And he said, be prepared to haul whatever they need hauled. He said, and be willing to go where nobody else wants to go. He said, you got a lot of folks out here. They don't want to run into New York City. They don't want to go to Seattle. They don't want to do the downtown stuff. A buddy of mine at home, he always kind of teases me. He said, when he's out trucking, he said, I'll come up on that exit that says, downtown exits, art museum, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I always think to myself, man, I'd hate to take a truck down in there. He said, that's the exit you're always getting off at. So I said, well, so once you get used to doing the downtown stuff, it's really not that bad. You just go in 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And, started out by doing specialized logistics. And then that kind of led into the entertainment industry. The concerts, it's not for everybody. It's not what everybody thinks it is. You're there to work. You're there to do a job. You better be willing to run at night because, as soon as the show's over, you're packing up and you're boogieing on down the road to the next one. Better make sure you get your sleep and get your eating done before it's time to go, because once you go, there's no time to stop. But I like it because there's most truck drivers don't get to see the end result of the job they do every day. We roll into a venue in the morning, it's a blank slate, just an empty arena. And, you see the road guys come pouring out of the buses, wiping the sleep out of their eyes, and they jump in there and go to work, and you watch it all transform into the concert arena that most people get to see. And, they call the doors, the lights, the show happens, the people are so excited about it, and then they leave, and it goes from the arena that everybody is familiar with back to a blank slate, and we're on our way to the next one. And, a long time ago when I started doing this, I had somebody tell me, they said, take your job serious. They said, because every show you do, they said, tonight will be somebody's first concert, and it'll be somebody's last concert. And that's kind of deep when you think about it, and I really enjoy that line of work. I do. It's tough sometimes, but it's fun. And the people you work with, you get to be like family,
Yeah, and you get free caramel candy too, I hear sometimes.
That's the rumor.
So what's the coolest? I seen that TikTok on Green Day posted where they filmed your truck sitting there. They were driving by it. He said something to the effect of, "Man, check out this. This is the kind of truck that's pulling our stuff to the shows and things like that." You had no idea they were going to be doing that. So that has to rank up there. One of the coolest. Pretty
That
cool.
was cool because we were in Chicago for Lollapalooza for the festival up there, and the Metro Club, which is a little. It was I want to say it was from the 20s. It was an old vaudeville club up in Wrigleyville, up by Wrigley Field, and they had booked Green Day for kind of like a private show that night, and so we had I had all the crews staged down by McCormick, and we took two trucks that because all we did was like backline and some other stuff. So we had two trucks up there at the Metro Club, and I had my other guy parked around back on Racine, and I was parked out in front of the venue. And when Green Day came in their van, they saw the truck. Because most of the time, those guys never see us. We'll see each other in catering and stuff like that, but a lot of times they don't see the trucks or anything. So they came in that night and saw the truck, and I guess they made their little TikTok about it. I didn't even know about it until later that night. Somebody shot me a message and said, "Hey, check this out." And I'm like, that's pretty cool, because I had actually been with Green Day back in, I want to say, like 2003, maybe something like that. Out at the old Willie Mays Stadium out in San Francisco. I was pulling for Cat Entertainment Services that night. So, yeah, long time between those two gigs.
Yeah, there's a little time passed there, wasn't there? Well, so what's been the coolest show you pulled for? The one that you enjoyed the most? And I know you've told me stories about going out to Red Rock. I don't know who you was pulling for then, but walking through that tunnel and seeing all those names. Where they.
Oh, that's the forum in Inglewood with all the names.
Okay,
Yeah,
I thought that was a Red Rock.
no, that's the old forum out in Inglewood, and it's kind of cool because when you go through the tunnel, it's just floor to ceiling of all the entertainers that have been there over the years. It's kind of cool walking down through that tunnel and thinking about all the people that have been there before, the Elvis and Frank Sinatra and the Beatles, just everybody you can imagine is on that wall, and that's pretty cool to walk down through there and think about all the people that have played at that forum down there. It's kind of gives you a little chill.
I guarantee it. I mean, you're talking about some of the biggest in the business, right? Or the biggest in the business.
Yeah. And then you think about the drivers that were doing that. There's a picture out there floating around the internet, and it was for Boston back when they were on tour, years ago. And there's an old cab over International, and there's a guy with a long beard and kind of long hair hanging off the side of that truck. A buddy of mine by the name of Spook Mayfield, he passed away beginning of this year, but him and I shared a lot of cool stories, and that was him hanging on the side of that old TransStar on that Boston tour. So he was one of the rock and roll haulers way before me. And man, that guy had some stories. He had some stories. One of the coolest lamina collections you've ever seen.
Oh yeah, he had an everybody, huh?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, it's man, a lot of things have changed, since then. I can imagine what it was like hauling those groups around back in the 70s and 80s, because the things have changed in the music industry just as much as they have the trucking industry, and I'm pretty sure they was probably a little wilder back then, and
yeah, some of the stories I've heard, yeah.
probably get away with a little bit more back then than you can these days, hauling those shows around. I'd say they had a little extra help, get them down the road, and a lot of good times. Well, listen, we're going to take another short break. We'll come back here in a minute. We're going to talk about even, as dedicated as you are to the trucking industry, and as long as you've been in it, I don't think you plan on doing it the rest of your life, and you've got some other aspirations that you're working on. We've been talking about starting some stuff with the cool MCI bus that you bought. I think it's MCI, right?
Yep, MCI.
No. Yeah, MCI. Okay, I was right. I thought so. And you're in the process of fixing that up and getting it painted to match your truck. And got some ideas with that. So we're gonna talk about your future plans, which still, by the way, keeps you out on the road, which is, I know, the only way you'd have it. We'll talk about that, but
I can't stop that.
no, we both gotta be in trouble. That's like me go, "Ain't you trucking anymore?" I'm like, "Well, no, not really, but I'm still out there." That's the main thing. I'm getting to do it now, and either in the bus or pulling my merchandise shredder with Purgatory. So I'm getting to get out there and enjoy the good part of trucking, just rolling down the road and not having to deal with shippers and receivers and the DOT as much. So anyway, we'll talk about that when we come back, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. Don't go anywhere. This last segment's going to be very interesting, and we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors. Again, if you haven't subscribed, hit that subscription button. We'd love to have you following along. Leave us a comment. We love hearing from you guys. We'll be checking the comments on these myself personally, and we'll reply to any questions y'all might have. and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Road Show with Tony Justice and friends. Having an awesome time just talking with John. You know, John, when I tell people about you and the hours that we spent together on the phone, I tell people I try to make sure I do more listening than talking, because I always learned something about trucking from you that I didn't know. I mean, almost every conversation, you're a wealth of knowledge. You run one of the tightest ships that I've ever seen when it comes to the trucking industry. You know your equipment. You do your job safe, thorough. You make the best of your time. The best I've ever seen at using the hours of service in an ELD and manipulating that in a legal way that I've ever seen. I mean, you understand the hours of service and how to split log. I've always been on paper. I never had to do all that. And it's just always a pleasure to talk with you and listen and learn. And man, I have just tons of respect for you, the way you do your job and your, the way you value it. And it's just, you're just so genuinely passionate about it. It's man, it was just when you talk to somebody like you, it's contagious, and that's cool. So I have to ask you, with that being said, and knowing, how much you love this industry and the era, that you started in and all the changes you've seen, when it comes to old school values in today's industry, trucking looks a lot different now, than it did when you started or I started. Well, what do you think are some of the old school values this industry still needs to hold on to today that you might see slipping away?
Well, when I started this, I had great teachers. I had my dad and his friends, so they get together like drivers do, and they tell stories, right? And there's so much to be learned from the stories. Now, I think something we've gotten away from is communication with each other. And that's huge. That is so huge. I'm not going to get out here and preach about the CB thing. We all know that's an issue out here. But something that's really affected this industry: communication between the drivers. The CB isn't just for finding out why the traffic's tied up or if the scale's open or things of that ilk. It's kind of like when you're climbing a hill out here and you see another truck approaching another one in the right lane and he's gaining on him. All right, well, if you're empty or light, back in the day, you jump on the radio and say, hey, so-and-so, bring it on out there, because you could easily get your speed up again, or if you had a good pull going on the guy, but you're heavy, but you hadn't lost your edge yet, you could holler at him and say, hey man, hang on just a second, I'll have this knocked out. You get around him. Same thing in a truck stop. A guy's backing in, jump on the radio and go, hey man, just, you're good on your right side or you're good on your left side, or, just communication between the drivers. We see a lot of things happen today where drivers get angry at other drivers. The reason they do it is because they don't realize why that driver is making particular maneuver. All right. They lose their patience. I see a lot of difference in, I don't want to call it road rage, but impatience with other drivers, because there's no communication there to know what the other driver's doing. I get the whole thing with the CBs. You got a lot of guys out here that don't even speak English now, but I miss that, because that made it a whole lot easier to do the job out here. And in turn, the courtesy was much easier to be courteous, because you could communicate with the other driver. He knew what you were trying to do. You knew what they were trying to do. And the whole thing just kind of flowed together. So that is an old school value that I really, really miss. I don't know how to bring it back. I wish I had an answer for it. I think the best thing I could say is just try to be patient with the other person. There's a lot of stupid stuff going on out here today, but try to be patient and see if you can try to read what they're doing. Try to figure out why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, you got a lot of people out here now that are doing this job, for a paycheck, and they have got to probably be the most frustrated people in the world. I could not imagine doing this job just because it's not as easy, and I know it's not as easy as everybody thinks it is, and it requires a lot of time alone in a cab, away from family, loved ones, or friends. And if they're out here for anything but just a paycheck, they're going to be that guy that's always irritated, mad at the other drivers, bitching and griping, And they're also going to be the guy that doesn't take the time to learn how to do their job correctly. That's doing something in a truck stop, holding up somebody else that's trying to do their job right, because their lack of learning how to do their job right, because they're just not interested. They just want that paycheck. So there's a lot of variables that cause that. and a lot of stuff you see, and it's hard to have patience and communicate sometimes because you automatically see somebody doing something, you think it's one of those idiots that shouldn't be.
I think one of the biggest things I could say is if you see somebody struggling, whether it be trying to back in or maneuver or whatever, don't make picking up your phone your first priority. All right, leave the phone in the cab, jump out of the truck and go help the driver out.
And then if he's an idiot, you get back in the truck and record it.
Grab you that. There you go. Yeah. But there's enough videos of people out here struggling, don't be a part of that problem. Go help the driver. Most of them really do want to help. We hear the complaint, well, they know everything. Give it a shot first. Just give it a shot. See somebody struggling, jump out, go help them out. It only takes a second out of your day.
Yeah, and I tell my kids and stuff all the time. At the end of the day, when you lay down in that bed, the only thing between you and the man upstairs is some shingles and some plywood, a couple of trusses, and some sheetrock. The only thing that matters is how we treat others and what we say to others. How other people act and what they do, that's on them. So I always try to encourage people to step up and be the first person to do the right thing, and then let the rest of it lay on whoever it needs to lay on. If they don't react to that correctly, then at the end of the day, you ain't got nothing to hang your head down about. We were talking about before we went into our last commercial break about some other aspirations that you've had. I mean, you've been discussing, you don't see yourself driving, trucking, hauling freight, for the rest of your life. You'd like to do some other things. And you've been talking about this ideal. I know you went and bought a bus, just I think the same year bus as your dad used to drive. Brought back those childhood memories, and you wanted to buy a bus like that, and you're painting it up to match your truck, and you want to go out on the road and capture some pretty cool stuff. So what's your aspirations? How do you want to build this thing out? What makes you think people will follow it?
Well, first of all, I'm not quitting trucking, okay? Because I don't think I'll ever get that out of my blood. I'll still go out and do a couple tours a year. I'm gonna keep my lease on with Landstar and do probably my minimums to maintain my lease over there. But I had this idea, so I bought a 41-year-old MCI 9 Greyhound bus, which is very similar to very similar to the first one that Dad ever put me behind the wheel of, So when I started riding with Dad, they were still running a lot of the old 50s and 60s coaches. But the one that is nearest and dearest to me was the one that Dad put me behind the wheel of the first time. So I got this crazy idea to buy this old bus and really didn't have a plan. I just wanted to buy one just so I could drive one again and have that memory, And some buddies of mine started talking to me and said, man, you ought to start like a podcast or something. I'm like, that's not really my style. And they're like, that's exactly your style. You've been doing this job for almost 40 years out here. You've seen a lot, you've done a lot. Years ago when I was in high school, my sister bought me a book. It was about a college professor out of Columbia, Missouri, that bought a little 1970s Ford Econoline van and took off running the back roads of the country. The book was called Blue Highways. And that book was always a huge influence on how I approached my career in trucking, making sure that I never just got focused on that white line, that I made sure that I saw the country, and I still, to this day, I'll still jump off and run a lot of 2 lanes. Now, a lot of the 2 lane I used to run has now been interrupted by highway bypasses and different interstates. So can't run a lot of the roads that I used to run, but there's still a lot of it out there. And my idea, we're going to paint the bus up to match the truck, make it something that hopefully garners attention when I pull in someplace. And we're going to take off, run around the country, hook up with old truck drivers, new truck drivers, maybe get a hold of some people like maybe Tariq or, some of the younger generation. Have them come out, spend a little time behind the wheel in the bus, like maybe take it on an old 2-lane road for 100 miles or something, and then sit down and talk to them in a podcast about the differences between, because, that old bus, it doesn't have cruise control, doesn't have J brakes, it doesn't even have a tack in it. It's got a 6V92 TA with a 5-speed direct, and you gotta listen to it when you're driving it. There's no cheaters on it. You have to really drive that. And I've had Sean driving it a lot. He's killing it with that thing, understanding how to operate an older engine and drive by the seat of your pants. And I'd like to get some new guys out here, spend a little time behind the wheel, and then talk to them and talk about the differences in generations of trucking, what it was like for the old guys. Talk about safety, talk about camaraderie, talk about brotherhood, and maybe try to spread the word and maybe bring a little bit back into the trucking industry that seems to have faded away over the years. And then I'm going to stick to as much 2-lane road as I can, kind of like the book that I read. Visit cool old places, talk about it on the podcast, make recommendations on cool places to visit, nice roads to run, things like that,
Yeah. Capturing those places, as we've done over the years, I tell people, truck drivers, we go everywhere, but we ain't been nowhere, because we watch everything go by out the window. We don't have time to stop and see things, like the Grand Canyon, or back when we used to could cross the dam out in Nevada, back, you remember those days back before 9/11, and, just some things that drivers today don't get to experience. So, yeah, I think you're onto something, man, especially going to those places where, as a driver, we always wanted to have time to stop and hang out a little bit and check it out. And you go into those places and then, and checking it out, but then, filming it and sharing it, the experience with other people, so they can, see America without all the expense. And those that don't have time to go out there and do that, they can live that dream through watching this podcast that you're going to make available. And you know what it's going to be called yet? Do you have a name for it?
Don't have a name for it yet. We're still working on that. I'm hoping my friend Tony Justice might have an idea on that.
Well, we might come up with something. Sometimes I come up with a good title every now and then. I tell people, when you spend a lot of time, you think of enough bad ideals or titles or songs, if you write enough of those bad ones, you get a good one every now and then. So maybe we can come up with a good title for it.
Well, I was talking to Van yesterday, and we'll still be promoting the Bull Stop products when we're out here doing the bus thing, because that's just become that's such a big part of the whole Freebird and Scooter, or Hooch as you'd call him, the whole Bull Stop thing. So really looking forward. He's going to have it, probably might be out about the same time as this podcast hits, but the Illumable 2.0 is going to be coming out here before long. And I've already tested some. He left some out on the road for me to pick up, and it's going to be an awesome product. I'm really looking forward to seeing that hit the shelves. We're still going to be doing the same thing out here. We're just going to be doing it with less wheels underneath us.
There you go. Less wheels, less DOT up your ass.
That's right. Yeah.
Good. We used some of that Illumable at the semi-casual truck show this past weekend on the Bennett trailer that they haul around. It's got those little aluminum fenders on it, and they were pretty bad looking. Man, I was pretty impressed with that stuff. It ain't going to be no sand down, polish out, look like chrome when you get done, but it really made a huge difference. How much it helped. Those fenders were in pretty sad shape, and they come right along. But hey, listen, man, I appreciate you being on today and taking the time to do it. I know you stay busy out there on the road, plus you're dealing with ELDs, timing things out. So thank you for your time. It's always a pleasure talking to you, whether we're talking on the phone or on the podcast. So when that podcast that you're talking about starts coming out, we'll have to have you back on so you can tell people how they can find you and watch that. I'm excited to see that thing get kicked off and get started.
I'm excited about doing it. I got one question for you before we cut out of here. Did you buy a good 4-way lug wrench yet?
I got my battery powered DeWalt now in my socket set in the trailer. That will not happen again.
All right, man. You take care.
But I ain't got some old school truck driver with me that's going to haul off and kick it with his cowboy kickers on and break the damn thing.
I guess that was an indication I might have put on just a little bit too much weight these days, huh?
One too many fast foods at the truck stop now. One too many roller dogs.
Maybe so.
Hey, we love you, brother. Stay safe out there. And everybody, thank y'all for tuning in. And as always, speed safely. We'll catch you the next time. God bless.